What if I told you there's a product on your pricing page that no one will ever buy that could be the most valuable thing you ever listed? Sound crazy? It's not. That's exactly what happened to The Economist. They had a subscription page with 3 options. One of them, the print-only subscription at $125. Not a single person chose it. 0. Out of 100 MIT students in a controlled experiment, nobody picked it. So they pulled it off the page, just 2 options left now, and revenue dropped 43%. A product nobody bought was generating 43% of the revenue, not through its own sales, through what it made people choose instead. That's called the Decoy Effect, and once you understand how it works, you're going to look at every pricing page, every proposal, every product lineup you've ever built, and wonder how much money you've left on the table. Today, we're breaking down the Decoy Effect, what the Decoy Effect is, why it works psychologically, and why it broke the brains of decision scientists when it was first discovered. Then I'm walking you through the Economist full story because you can use it to model your own marketing and pricing. After that, we'll look at how Apple has weaponized this across their entire product line in a way that most people never notice. We'll look at the original 1992 study that started it all: beer, cars, restaurants, and TVs. Then we'll wrap up with the 3 ways to use the Decoy Effect so you can add it to your marketing playbook. All right, so what exactly is the Decoy Effect? When buyers are choosing between 2 options, adding a third option, one that's clearly worse than the one of the originals but not the other, shifts the buyer's preference towards the option the decoy loses to. That third option is the decoy. Nobody's supposed to pick it. Its entire job is to make the option you want them to pick look like the obvious winner. Now, the nerdy term for this is asymmetric dominance effect. The decoy isn't bad at everything. It's only clearly worse than one of the options. That imbalance, that asymmetry, it's what creates the marketing magic. Here's why this matters so much. People are generally terrible at comparing things that are different. You put 2 options in front of a buyer, one's cheaper and one has more features, and they freeze. Apples and oranges. They can't easily tell which one is the better deal, so they stall. They default to the cheapest, or they leave. But you put a third option next to one of those 2 that's obviously worse, suddenly the brain has an easy comparison to grab onto. The easy comparisons feel like smart decisions. The buyer picks the option that dominates the decoy, feels great about it, and moves on. Here's the thing. We all fall for this, even knowing it exists. The comparison happens fast. It feels completely irrational, and it operates below conscious analysis. Your brain sees the shortcut and takes it before you've even finished reading the pricing page, which is exactly what makes it so useful if you're the one designing that page. Okay, so let's tell the whole Economist story properly because it's worth understanding everything so you can put it into practice. Dan Ariely, behavioral economist at Duke, author of Predictably Irrational, stumbles across the Economist subscription page and something doesn't add up. 3 options: web-only access, $59 a year; print-only, $125 a year; print and web together, also $125 a year. Now pause on that just for a second. Print only and print plus web were the same price. Why would anyone in their right mind pay $125 for just print when they could get print and digital for the same $125? Dan was fascinated, so he tested it. 100 MIT students, pick one. 84% chose print and web. 16% chose web only, and the print only, 0, nobody. So if nobody's buying it, pull it, right? Clean up the page. He did exactly that. He removed the print-only option, gave another 100 students just 2 choices: web at $59 a year or print and web at $125 a year. Everything flipped. Now 68% went with the cheap web-only option. Only 32% chose the combo. Same prices, same products. The only thing that changed was removing an option nobody was choosing anyway. And revenue dropped from roughly $11,444 to $8,012, across those 100 students. Here's what happened in those buyers' heads. With 3 options on the table, students weren't comparing $59 digital to a $125 combo. That's a hard comparison. Different formats, different price points, apples and oranges. But $125 print only versus $125 print and web? That's the easiest comparison in the world. The combo dominates. It's obviously better. And once the brain makes that easy comparison, the $125 page stops feeling expensive. It feels like a bargain. Remove the decoy, and the only comparison left is $59 versus $125. Now the combo just looks expensive. The Economist essentially built a product nobody would ever buy, and it became the most profitable thing on the page, not because of what it sold, because of what it made everything else feel like. That's the real move here. You're not tricking buyers into overpaying. Every person who picked the combo got a great product at a legitimate price. What you're doing is removing friction, simplifying the decision, making the right choice feel obvious. Now let's look at a company that doesn't just use the decoy effect on the pricing page. They've built it into their DNA of the entire product strategy. Apple. When the iPhone 14 launched in 2022, there were 4 models. The base iPhone 14 at $799, the iPhone 14 Plus at $899, the Pro at $999, and the Pro Max at $1,099. Now think about the Plus for a second. $100 more than the base model. And what do customers get? A bigger screen. That's basically it. Same chip, same camera system, just larger. But then they look one tier up. For $100 more, the Plus. They get the Pro, completely new processor, dramatically better camera system, the dynamic island, ProMotion display, a fundamentally different phone. The Plus suddenly looks like a terrible deal relative to the Pro. And once a buyer is comparing the Plus to the Pro, once they're in that mental frame, the Pro Max at just $100 more feels like the natural next step. Biggest screen, best camera, no compromises. Here's the punchline. The i14 Pro and Pro Max absolutely dominated sales. According to analysts, the Pro Max alone captured a massive share of the US market, far outpacing both the base model and the Plus. Apple effectively used the lower tier models to push buyers up the chain. And they do this everywhere. MacBook Air versus the 14-inch Pro versus the 16-inch Pro. The iPad versus the iPad Air versus the iPad Pro. Storage tiers, 128 gig, 256 gig, 512 gig, where the price gaps shrink as they go up. Each product isn't just a product. It's a reference point for the product next to it. Here's the lesson for you. Apple doesn't have a pricing page with 3 tiers and most popular badge. They have an entire product architecture engineered so that every option makes the more profitable option feel like the smart move. That's the decoy effect at scale. And it's a masterclass in designing decisions, not just designing products. Now let's go to where all this started. 1982. Duke University, 3 researchers, Joel Huber, John Payne, and Christopher Puto, publish a paper in the Journal of Consumer Research with the title that only an academic would love. Adding asymmetrically dominated alternatives, violations of regularity and similarity hypothesis. But here's what they actually did and why it mattered. At the time, there was a bedrock rule in choice theory called regularity. It basically said, when you add a new option to a set of choices, it should never increase the probability of someone picking an existing option. The new thing takes share from the old things, or nobody picks it and nothing changes. That was considered a law of fundamental decision-making. Huber, Payne, and Puto decided to break it. They recruited 153 students and put them through choices across 6 product categories: beer, cars, restaurants, movies, TVs, and lottery tickets. In each category, participants chose between 2 options. Then the researchers added a third, a decoy, worse than one option on every dimension, but not worse than the other on every dimension. To unpack this a little bit more, imagine you're choosing between two beers. Beer A, great taste, average price. Beer B, average taste, great price. Tough call, right? Pretty evenly split. Now add beer C, similar to taste to beer A, but more expensive. Nobody's going to pick C. But what happens? Suddenly beer A, the one that dominates C, gets the bump. More people pick A than before. Adding an option nobody wanted changed which option people did want. That happened in 5 out of the 6 categories, everything except lottery tickets. The decoy consistently increased the share of the item it was dominated by. This was a big deal. It directly violated the regularity principle. It told decision scientists that their models of how people choose were fundamentally incomplete. People don't evaluate options independently. They evaluate them relative to whatever else is in front of them. Change the context, even with an option nobody chooses, and you change the decision. The authors later called this one of the biggest exports from marketing research to the broader social sciences. And 40 plus years later, it's still one of the most replicated findings in behavioral economics. Here are 3 ways to put the decoy effect to work in your marketing. First, reverse engineer your pricing page from the option you most want to sell. Most people build pricing pages from the bottom up. Basic, pro, enterprise, here's what's in each one, and then they hope for the best. How many times have we seen this? Flip that. Start with the plan you actually want most customers to pick. That's your target. Now build everything else around it to make the target the obvious winner. If you're trying to push the middle tier, create a lower tier that's just cheap enough to attract attention but visibly lacking, and an upper tier that's priced high enough to make the middle feel like it's a sweet spot. But here's the marketing pro move. If you want to push your top tier, create a second option priced just slightly below it with meaningful fewer features. Make the gap between the two so small that the jump feels effortless. That's exactly what Apple does with storage upgrades. And it's what The Economist did with the print-only versus print and web. The key? The comparison between your decoy and your target has to be dead simple. Same price, fewer features. Similar features, worse value. The easier the comparison, the harder the decoy works. Second, use decoys in proposals, not just on pricing pages. This works in B2B too. Client proposals, sales conversations, anything you're presenting options. And you should almost always present 3. If your ideal project scoped at $50K, include a stripped-down version at $45K that feels insufficient and a premium version at $85K that feels like overkill. The $50K lands. Not because it's cheap, but because the alternatives frame it as the right choice. Just remember, the decoy has to be a legitimate offer, something you'd be happy to deliver if they choose it. It shouldn't just be the best value. And when your client looks at all 3 options side by side, they should be able to see it for themselves. This also works in pitches when you're presenting creative concepts, campaign budgets, or scope options. 3 options. 1's designed to win. 2 designed to make the winner feel inevitable. Third, audit your existing lineup for accidental decoys working against you. Here's something most marketers never think about. The decoy effect doesn't just work when you design it intentionally. It works when it shows up accidentally, and sometimes it's pointing in the wrong direction. Go look at your current plans, products, or pricing tiers. Ask yourself, is there an option that's making my least profitable product look like it's the smart choice? Because if you've got a $29 plan with decent features and a $49 plan that doesn't add much more, you haven't created a decoy for that $49. You've created a decoy for that $29 plan. Buyers look at those two, see the $29 as the obvious winner, and you've just talked yourself out of a higher margin sale. This happens all the time. Pricing pages that accidentally make the cheapest plan the hero. Product lineups where the middle option looks overpriced instead of underpriced. Menus where the margins are thinnest on the item that feels like the best deal. So before you build a new decoy, make sure your current options aren't already working against you. Sometimes the biggest revenue unlock isn't adding a product. It's repositioning the ones you've already got. That's the decoy effect, an option nobody chooses that changes everything. Remember, your customers never evaluate a price in isolation. They evaluate it against whatever you put next to it, which means every option on your page, in your proposal, in your product lineup, every single one, is either making your best offer look smarter or it's making something else look smarter. The print-only subscription was never meant to sell. The medium popcorn was never meant to sell. The iPhone 14 Pro wasn't designed to be the best seller. They all existed to make something else feel irresistible. Go look at your pricing page, your proposals, your product lineup. Find the option that nobody picks. Then ask yourself, is this pushing buyers where you want them to go? And if you don't have a decoy yet, build one, because 43% revenue increase might be sitting right there, waiting. Your marketing move.